So, all right. Removing my LinkedIn. There we go. It is what it is. I don't know why it won't post on LinkedIn, but I don't like it. Anyhow, I think we're now live. So while we're messing about with the technology. So welcome back to the latest in the Moretti and a catch-up sessions. Today we've got Colin Hewitt, who is the co-founder of Float. Float is an app that manages cash flows and cash flow scenario planning, and it's been heavily championed by Northern accountants during the COVID-19 crisis. So just in the nick of time, I'd left my beer at home. I believe one has just turned up, which is miraculous. So, Colin, what have you got to drink today?
I am drinking Scottish beer. We're based in Scotland, called Black Isle. So it's a Black Isle blonde, and it's a really good beer staple.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I've got the traditional Moretti, which has been kindly delivered by Michael, so that was very kind of him. So basically, now we've messed about talking about different beers, which I'm sure everybody's massively more interested in than talking about cash flow. But anyway, we'll go through and talk about the bits and pieces. So do you just want to give us an introduction to yourself and an overview of what you do?
Yeah, so I founded Float back in 2012. 2010 actually was when we started working on it, and I had an agency, a design agency at the time. So we were building websites and apps for other businesses, and just starting to think it'd be nice to have a bit of to be able to do this on our own product, and that really kind of that we just got the bug. I was over in America. I remember it really well, and had this opportunity to sort of go, hey, I wonder if we could I've got this really good engineer who became a co-founder called Phil. I think the two of us, we've got we've got this problem of forecasting the cash that we're doing in a spreadsheet, and just thinking how do we manage, how could we make this an app? And somebody said anywhere we're using a spreadsheet, there's an opportunity for a better solution. So that was kind of the beginning of it, and we started working on it and became a real business in 2012.
Yeah, that's excellent. So obviously you touched there on what it actually is in terms of it's a cash flow sort of forecasting app. But how do you go about working with businesses and people in that sort of thing?
Yeah, so when we started off, I didn't know very much about accounting at all. I just knew, how much cash we have in the bank. Here's all the commitments we have at the end of the month, the payroll, rent, and that kind of thing. So we really started we came up with an idea, which is based on a spreadsheet that we were running. And then we put it in front of some business owners as well and said, would this work for you? And the first solution we came up with was actually way too complicated, and we learned very quickly that we have to make this super automated, really streamlined, and just make it easy to use with very little accounting jargon. Most of the other businesses we were speaking to didn't get accounting language either. So so it was a lot of trial and error, just putting it out there, getting people interested, and then building it up from feedback.
So one of the things you talked about there is your first edition was very complicated. Mm-hmm. There seems to be this massive sort of preconception about cash flow forecasting. Mm-hmm. I know when we talk to people and clients about it's it's not worth it. It becomes it's so difficult to do. It's so time consuming. Stuff like that. What would your sort of answer to that be?
Yeah, well, I think the thing that we find is that if you're committed to getting kind of real-time financial information, which is always our goal, you sort of you find out what the barriers are and you work around those. So for us, a big barrier was, when Xero introduced live feeds, that was like bank feeds, that was really, really helpful. All of a sudden we didn't have to import, our bank statements anymore. We're able to first of all go through the scraping system Yodlee, and then we get the direct feeds now, which means that it's even better. And then what else could we do? So we introduced receipt banks, so we forward all our invoices and bills to that, and then they get processed and into Zero, and then we use other tools like Soldo and Expensify. So we've just really, like, anytime we see a barrier to this system, like what's stopping this information being up to date, and then we're the ones who are asking our bookkeeper to say, hey, can you reconcile our bank statements like every couple of days, because we want to have this real. So once you kind of got the desired outcome, which was for us the cash flow piece, then all the other systems seem to fall into place, and it's just about removing blockages. So that became the thing. I was like, I want to see this. If anybody's not submitting their expense returns or not sending bank, they're not getting them paid. So all of a sudden that changes it. And yeah, we're now keeping a really tight ship with that. We've got Zero closed by a couple of days after the month end, and we're just like, what can we do to make this better all the time?
I think that what you've hit the nail on the head there is absolutely right, because what you talked about there is about the need for real-time information in order to do cash flow. And I think a lot of people don't appreciate the importance of having your accounts up to date to enable to do your cash flow forecasting. So what they'll try to do is to do it off broken records or what's off the top of their head, or they'll be looking back at what happened this time last month or this time last year, and all of a sudden it does become really, really time consuming. But if we change the focus, and it's something we talk about extensively, we on the 1st of July we launched our daily bookkeeping service. So last year we moved from quarterly and monthly to weekly, and now it's gone to daily. So our larger clients are now moving on to daily bookkeeping, so they're touched every single day. We've now got that facility where we can basically put that information in front of them, be able to give them this sort of forecasting tool. So I think people do want cash flow, and you talk to everybody, cash flow's rubbish, cash flow's tight, I'm struggling with this, or I've got all this cash, I don't know what to do with it. So some people who are the lucky ones. But again, it's they don't put the two things together. That the fact that if you want to understand what your future looks like, you've got to understand what the present does and what's happened in the past. So I think by, like you say, removing the barriers and understanding that by having that real-time information, you can have cash flow is massively important. So yeah, absolutely. So in terms of, I touched there on about sort of scenario planning. I mentioned it briefly. So I know that is a superb facility that's got within Float. So what's the reasoning, the logic behind that? What do you see as why that's there and the importance of it?
Yeah, so scenario planning wasn't always in Float. Certainly in the early days, we didn't have that functionality, and I think it became quite apparent that one of the major things you want to do with your cash flow is do the what ifs. So like, what if we were to take on another member of staff? What if we were to, what if that client doesn't pay us on time? What happens? So you can make all those changes, but then you kind of feel like, well, now I want to go back to what I was, I had originally, because those were just questions that I was asking. So we built the scenarios feature to be able to sort of almost see those multiple views at one time. So you're always kind of you're always able to go, right, here's the scenario if sales go according to plan, like sales go really well, and here's the scenario if sales go really badly. And you're by being able to see those both at the same time, you can kind of you just got much greater visibility into like what's the range here, because it might be the range doesn't matter, or it might be the bad scenario, like what are we going to do if these two clients don't pay us this month? We're going to need to do something drastic, like, and it's sometimes going into that mode. But you still, it's not what you're hoping for, but you can actually see these multiple outcomes in one place, and that's something we really felt like is that's the whole power of cash flow forecasting, and scenario planning part to it.
Yeah, I think fear is a major driver in this. We've talked a lot historically about business owners always being the last people to be paid, and then subsequently not being paid because there's no money in the bank. So one of the things we've always encouraged clients to do is pay yourself first. You should be the first person paid, because that way it's out the bank. You've been paid, you've been taken care of, which is, let's be honest, why we all set up in business. We all set up in business to feather our own nest, to look after it. I think if anybody tells you they do it to save the world or anything like that, I think there's a bit of a lie in there. They're doing it generally to enhance their own personal balance sheets, their own lifestyles, their own work-life balances. But I think what they get caught up in the mix, and I think by when you put fear into the situation, and you have a scenario where I don't have enough money to pay the team or to pay the rent or to pay my suppliers, it always seems to me that you always find a way to do it. And very, very rarely does that involve you putting money back in. Because once it's out, you don't want to put it back in because you've already accounted for it. You've already spent it. If you're anything like me, chances are your wife spent it or something along those lines. It's gone. You never see it again. Whereas, if it wasn't there, and we were guilty of this historically as well, we wouldn't take it out. It wasn't there to spend, but then you didn't get paid, so it became that. So as soon as I had that mentality switch, probably 10 years ago now, the whole sort of ethos of everything switched. So being scared not to pay somebody forced me to take evasive action to ensure that they did get paid. And they always did get paid. So you'd work harder on your credit control, you'd work harder on your sales, you'd work harder on your delivery, and you get those numbers out to make sure those are the cash in the bank. But whereas I think when you're the one that suffers, you're prepared to take that. And you go, it's Friday night and I can't be bothered to do that. So
yeah, no, we find that in our own business. My first business really apparently, just deciding like we're going to set the direct debit up. And we actually did it. The other thing we did was we did it for savings. So we had a direct debit or a standing order, transferring money from one of our bank accounts into another bank account, which was ours, because we're like, we have to save. And it's the same concept. Like, it's much harder to take money out of a bank account once it's gone, or if you do it very intentionally. So that was, even we applied that rule even for saving and putting a bit, let's aim to build up a sort of cash reserve. So every month we're going to take out a couple of grand and put in another bank account, and that we've got a plan for that cost. And I think the nice thing is when you put that into your cash flow, then you're looking at your cash flow going, right, what we really need to do to hit our targets. We really need to put in, not just kind of like thinking, oh, we'll be okay. It really kind of lights a fire under you to kind of hit the targets that you need to hit.
It kind of changes you from surviving into thriving, because you always have that worst case scenario built in. That's what I've absolutely got to do, and it moves you from, I can just get by. So I must admit, I do the same, and I have it in a bank account that I don't even have the logins to. So I've purposely got to go out my way to get the logins. I think Jane holds the logins. I don't even know what they are. So I've purposely got to go out my way to ask Jane for the logins for her to log me in to me to be able to activate. Well, I can never be bothered. So I never end up having to go for it. So then your cash reserve just mount up, and again that gets factored into your cash flows and all that sort of stuff. And again, it's almost out of your mind. So it's just a nice bit of security. And I think if one thing COVID has taught us is that we really do need to start thinking about having cash reserves. I mean, one of the things, I got a great piece of advice from a guy who was on here before, Lee Clayton. He told me that you should always have 3 months cash reserve in a bank account for your business and for you personally. Well, you could say that as a financial advisor, to make sure that in the event of anything untoward happening, that you're covered. And I think everybody thought, I thought this time, God, I can't afford to have 3 months of money just sat there doing nothing. I could have a really good time on that, or I could go on holiday, or I could buy a car, or pay my mortgage off, or whatever it might be. But I think when this hit, having that there, I think it really opened people's eyes to the fact that actually this could happen. No one ever thinks, oh, well, I won't get paid and I won't get everything, and I might be a bit skint and I won't be able to go out in the town, I won't be able to go to the pub or eat out or whatever it is, or I might not be able to redecorate the office or whatever it might be. But actually, this thing has actually said this can happen, and it can really cause some real pain. So I think hopefully what I'm starting to see with clients when I talk to them, especially the ones that have adopted Float. I think when we first started using this, we only had a few people on it, and we used it extensively. I think since the COVID outbreak, we've put 50 people on, which from before having those conversations with 50 people before, we wouldn't have got anywhere near the traction of what we got now. But I think that sort of fear and that sort of stark realization that actually we don't know what's going to happen now. All the norms have gone out the window. It's really driven people into that position. So, I think, it's been a real positive, and people are starting to think, I do need to factor savings into my cash flow. And you can see it in people's bank accounts when I look at their accounts. Those accounts, even though we've been in this dark time, those savings accounts are starting to swell a little bit. All right, some are bigger than others and some are very small, but there's that constant sort of drive in there. So I do think COVID has been great from a point of view. I can't say COVID has been great. COVID has been positive from a point of view in terms of mindset for business owners and things like that.
Yeah, I think it has been a bit of a wake up call to the, it's sometimes you have to have something go wrong in order to get you into that mindset of like, I don't want this to happen again. And I think the 3 months thing is great advice. One of the things you can do in float is you can actually exclude a bank account from your cash flow, so you don't need to think of that as cash that you've got in the business. And that I really like that, because I used to take out that savings account and saying I don't need that money. I'm not planning on transferring that money in. So while it's on our balance sheet, it's not actually cash that we want to think that we can actually dig into. So you're only looking at certain accounts that are, like our current account is what we're trying to manage the cash for. And that's actually, like I said, it's motivating. And for the other side, people who have cash, I think it's kind of useful to think, well, what's the point of just accumulating more cash in the business? Like, either put it to some use. So either we're thinking like, well, what could we afford to spend, and confidently spend over the next, year. So maybe we actually increase our marketing budget by 5,000 to 10,000 a month, and we can still see at the end of the month we're still okay. And I think when there's a bit of fear around the unknown, people tend to like hold on more. And certainly for me, I was a very visual person. So you just give me a spreadsheet of numbers, it's kind of like, really. But if I can see a line on a graph just going, down and or up, that makes such a difference to me, just to be able to see visually. And I think there's a lot of business owners are in the same boat.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's hard for us as accountants to recognize that or comprehend that, because the spreadsheet floats my boat all day long. It's like, right, I can understand what's going, I know what's happening, I can see that's moving down there, and I don't need it on a graph to tell me what where it is. I'll probably put a clever conditional format in so it goes red or something like that. That's about the extent of my knowledge. But I do think one of the things float does, I do think it makes it massively visual and massively simple to understand the actual impact of what your cash position is likely to look like. And I think the scenario planning is second to none, really. I do think that is an excellent addition to the tool. I really do. So we've obviously talked about scenario planning. So what do you think, in terms of, what do you think the importance of it is in terms of, if I'm a business owner and you're sat trying to pitch to me about why I should use float, why is that sort of long-term forecasting important to me as a business owner? So a lot of people will be sat there thinking, you know what, I'm all right, I've got enough cash in the bank, I'm going to be all right. But how would you address those sorts of confidences, I suppose?
Yeah, I think it's this thing. It's this concept of things creeping up on you that you think you're fine, and actually, you might have this. I remember hearing of a business, a friend of mine, his business that went bust, and she didn't know that there was something funny going on, like somebody was taking money out. And I don't know about you, but I'm not. Well, obviously, Phil, you're different to me, but I'm not likely to look into our zero account very much at all. Like I'm not. That's not where I go at all. So I'm generally like, I've got an idea of what's in the bank account. But if something started to happen, like there was a trend, or just being able to see that graph, it's so easy for me to spend a few minutes just coming in and looking at that and going, okay, this is what we're planning to do. And the fact that you've got real numbers in there, it's not just a spreadsheet that like somebody could send you and say, here's the spreadsheet. It's actually your real numbers. And if you've got a question like, oh, why are we spending this much on marketing? You can just click in and see exactly where the spend is going. Or if there's a lot of money that's due, you can click in and go, hold on, why are those guys not paid us? Or we shouldn't still be paying for that. So it gives me those kind of high level conversations that I need first and foremost as a business owner. But I like to say, so it's just that for me, I find it hard to process like numbers in a spreadsheet. There's lots of, obviously you can look at the bottom line, but seeing the daily cadence of the graph. So like when the VAT, comes out every quarter, there's a dip. A lot of businesses, they can think they've got tons of cash they've got their VAT and their corporation tax and their PAYE, and they weren't even expecting it. So having that confidence to know, right, looks like we've got hundreds of thousands in the bank, but actually next quarter we're going to have a big chunk coming out. So that's not the time to be spending a lot of money. and you don't realize then also we're dependent on a couple of big clients paying their invoices on time. Again, like, let's see what happens there. We take and it's very different. So I just think that, there's too many business owners that don't have that visibility, or they have blind trust in their somebody in their business that they know what they're doing, which obviously is great. And I'm not here for that. But I still like just to know from a government point of view, like, this is our cash flow, how much runway we've got. This is our rough burn rate. There's just a few kind of key metrics that I think we can offer that you're not going to get out of your accounting software, and bring up interesting conversations as well. So that's kind of the way we do it.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things right now is, you touched on it about this unforeseen sort of money coming out and people having lots of money in their account. Right now, we've seen unprecedented support from the government. So we haven't paid VAT bills, corporation tax bills have been able to be deferred, self-assessment payments, which a lot of businesses take out of the company, have not been up due at the end of the month. Like Sarah touched on the VAT. We've had bounce back loans, we've had C-bills loans. All of a sudden, a lot of people's accounts are looking quite healthy at the moment, and people are going, what can I spend all this money on? So, and then they forget that actually come March next year, this big chunk of cash has all got to have gone, be paid out, and then you've got to start repaying. So I think the long-term forecasting of it now is, even though there's plenty of cash in the bank, is more important than ever, because I think there's a big misconception about security about that.
Yeah, so much so. I think the biggest one for me is the VAT. Like, it's just when you've got that VAT deferred coming out, for some people that's going to be it's a lot of cash. We were like, somebody asked me, are you going to defer your VAT? And I was like, no, because it's like, we're going to have to pay it at some point. So the fact that we could afford to pay, I was like, let's just pay it. But a lot of people just sort of like, and I think rightly so, like, take the money when it's available. So bounce back loans, 100%. But yeah, you've taken the bounce back and you've got your deferred VAT, quite a big chunk, and you just want to know, like, that I would even start to try and put that in a separate bank account and stop thinking that it's your cash as soon as you can, because that's really only a temporary measure to help people out. I think you're right. Like, and knowing, like, I don't know when people's year ends are, but you could have like that, triple whammy of starting to repay loan, having your VAT deferred thing, and your corporation tax, and potentially like having to write off some invoices that you thought you were going to get as well. So a lot of what ifs that I think are worth getting on the same page on, and you do that in a spreadsheet once, it's out of date the next day. As soon as you find out something else has happened, and nobody wants to be spending time. Like, the nice thing for me about Float is, like, once you're doing daily bookkeeping, you know exactly where you are. Well,
it links direct, doesn't it? I don't know if everybody who's watching this will know that, but it actually links directly to your Xero. So if your Xero's up to date, you've got real-time information on which to forecast on the future. Yeah.
And some people think, looking at my bank account, I've got tons of money in the bank, and they don't realize that there's a big bill that they have to pay that they didn't. They thought, I thought we'd paid that already. And so somebody's off making an order for something or taking extra money out of the business, and they don't realize that the bill that they thought their partner was going to pay actually hasn't gone out of the bank account yet. So you need some way of getting everybody on the same page, especially as the business grows beyond, a couple of people. We tend to find, like, once you get beyond 5 people in a business, there's just lots of little things happening, other people making conversations, that kind of stuff, and it's just worth having some system where you can all get on the same page.
Especially where there's senior people as well, so people who have the right to make a decision and a commitment and things like that. I often see that when a sole trader, let's call a sole trader, a single director company, is running along quite nicely, and he brings an ops director in, or he brings a marketing director in, or she brings a sales director in, or she brings a general manager in, or whatever those things might be, and all of a sudden you've now got 5 people spending money, but no central source. So I think one of the great things that Float does is it allows you all to sit around. We do it in ours. We sit around the computer and we have a look at and go, right, who's committed to what, and there's budgets and there's all sorts of things, that's allocated. So you've overspent on the marketing side of things this month, or you spent so much money on Moretti, Phil, or whatever it might be. I normally get told for the softer side of things, and the others are a lot more practical. But But yes, I think like you say, I think it's massively important that is done, especially amongst the senior management team, because as businesses grow, you can't do everything yourself, so you can't control absolutely everything.
No.
I was just talking to a client earlier who was talking about that exact same thing. The long-term forecasting is now becoming important because growth costs money. You don't just grow overnight just because it happens. So you can't just wake up one morning and go, I'm going to treble in size, because you actually need to fund that growth. So how do you see cash flow forecasting in sort of the preparation or the delivery of growth?
Oh yeah, I mean it's absolutely huge, because it I read recently the story of Nike, Shoe Dog, and I don't know if you've read that, but it's brilliant, and you just see the impact that cash flow has on their business. They need to get the cash in order to acquire more stock to grow the business, and it's just depending. Everybody has a slightly different business model, but fundamentally, it is about making sure that you've got, where do you need to invest to grow the business? If it's stock, or actually for us, like in our bit in float, it was people. So we went through a season that we've just gone through. We've just doubled in size in the last 18 months, from 15 people to 30 people. And, a big part of that was bringing in a senior management team. And so that's been, those are big salaries that you're bringing in to manage the next phase of growth. And it feels a little bit like, when you're a startup and you're not paying yourself very much, and you're bringing in senior people, like that's a big decision. But I think I see many businesses holding off on that because they just think, oh, we could never afford that. That's what the cash flow is for. It's about helping you get to the next stage of growth and investing. We are starting to, I've just taken on executive assistant as well. So we're starting to think, like, instead of that, how can we hold off from spending as much money as possible? Like, where do we need to invest to get the people doing the right things and get the people in the right seats to go to the next phase of growth? And that, I like you said, I don't think you can do that without investing.
No, I think there's almost like I do think one of the key barriers I talk to a lot of people about, a lot of people we deal with, is the sort of £1 million barrier. I think I don't mean to be dismissive, but it's relatively easy to get to that kind of level and still be a sole director and do those things yourself. To go to that next sort of level, which you sort of next barrier is probably 5 million realistically before you start breaking into those things. You really do need that full understanding and that sort of, and you use the word, I think, which was important there, was invest, using money to invest. It's not spending money, it's investing money. And I do think there's a lot of fear around that because the people see it as spending. I'm going to come in, I'm going to bring an ops director who's going to cost me 50, 60, 70 grand a year, or whatever the number might be. I'm not taking 50, 60, 70 grand a year, but I'm going to pay him to do it. But they get the benefit at the long term. So it is very much about a mindset change. And I think, like you say, float helps facilitate that change. So I think that's really good. Really good. So obviously talking about growth and things like that. So in order to grow, you can't always do it organically. You sometimes do need some business support. How do you, obviously, I kind of know the answer, but, from your point of view, how do you see the role in that forecasting plays in borrowing and lending? So you want to talk around that, because you'll have obviously massive experiences in this sort of thing as well.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I think I remember seeing a stat that a lot of businesses don't like to borrow. And certainly in my first business, I wasn't a big fan of, we never borrowed. We had an overdraft and we used that. And I think at one point then, somebody advised us to take out a loan and use that instead of the overdraft because it was cheaper. So I just think that if you've got a vision for where your business needs to get to, then that's when you're putting money to use. You're putting it, it's one thing to take out money just to keep it, as a sort of security blanket. But really, if you get to the point where you're like, I can see how I can invest. If you're a restaurant, you're like, we need to do a new fit out. We need to actually invest in a better system for, training our staff, or what is it that you're going to do that's going to take your business to the next level. And I think that's a great use of cash, because you're taking out the cash up front and then you're paying it back over in monthly installments. Hopefully, seeing the revenue increase at the same time. So it's just all about cash flow. So, you know, you can do that on your own if you've got the cash. Some people would rather do that, but actually, like you say, then if you spend all of your own cash, and then a crisis happens, like we've just seen, then you can be in real trouble. Whereas with a loan, you know, the people have been able to pause repayments, and then draw on their own cash. So it's a really, you know, if you can get good terms, and I think obviously now there's some really good loan terms out there. It's a really good way to do it. It's not helpful for me is whenever people just want to they're taking it to buy things that they want, like, you know, fancy offices or
funded lifestyles or egos.
Yeah, exactly, because it's kind of that. It's not a credit. It's not like the same as, you know, putting things on your credit card. Like that's basically for me. Like we've always sort of tried not to do that. So, but actually with a business case, it's about investing money. I spoke to a business owner the other day who was saying, "Oh, I can't see why we would take out, you know, the bounce back loan. I don't know what we would spend it on." And I said, actually, that's fair enough if you don't really know what you would spend it on. But I see some businesses, especially like, you know, cafes and hairdressers and stuff, that every couple of years you need to put a bit of, the shop starts looking a bit tatty, and if you don't invest in that, the customers there's a new restaurant or a cafe or a, you know, barbers or whatever, that people either think, oh, that's new, that's sort of exciting, I'll go there. And you do have to think about where there's going to be a chunk of investment happens at some point, and where are we going to fund that? So it's either going to come out of our savings or it can come out of a loan. And I think loans are, some people grow up with that mindset that's, you know, any kind of lending is bad except for a mortgage. And I think when it comes to business, you're actually making an investment decision. Like, do we want to do that? And some people that's very obvious, but others who are more of a lifestyle business, not obvious always.
No.
But yeah, we've never gone down the road of trying to push loans on people. I never was trying to sell people loans that they don't need. But I do think, like, you know, showing there's great services like Capitalize out there that kind of show you what kind of loans you could get, whether it's invoice finance or whether, you know, it's just a straight repayment loan. I think there's lots of good options out there now, and it's definitely worth considering.
Absolutely. And like you say, and the other big thing is that in order to get these loans, you need to demonstrate the fact that you're in control of your finances. And therefore, something like a float demonstrates the need for the cash flow, the return on the investment. So again, having that sort of thing presents options for you to make those investments in your business later. So I think, like you say, that's a massively important thing. So what else was I going to talk to you about? You mentioned something earlier. You talked about some key metrics that you measure. What would you say the key metrics around cash flow are? Because that's a question I get asked quite a lot.
Yeah. So the three big ones for me, you know, how much cash do we have in the business right now? I think that's not just a case of looking at your bank account. It's that, you know, it's that kind of taking all the other commitments out of the picture, out of the equation as well. So what's our kind of true cash position today? The next one is like, how much runway have we got? So, you know, we think about that, like, you know, have you got 3 months if nothing else came in? If your sales are, and you might have different scenarios, like if sales stay the same, like if you're like a cafe or a restaurant or something, like if sales stay the same, then what would be, are we making money, or are we losing money in terms of cash? And so you can kind of get a number on number of months. So some people might be like, yeah, look, if sales don't pick up in the next 6 months, we're going to actually hit cash negative. And that's never a good thing. And the final one we talk about is called burn rate. So how much am I burning or making in cash each month? So it's kind of like a net position. So if we're making 60,000 a month, and we're burning 70,000, or spending 70,000, then our burn rate is 10K. It's just a good number, and we sort of try and average that out over 3 months. So just a good number to kind of know, like, actually, yeah, we're burning, you know, 20, 30K at the moment, but we've got cash in the bank. So that's, you know,
that's all right. Yeah.
Hopefully you're seeing that money, that changing over time. So you're either going into a period of investment where you know that's going to get higher, or you're actually trying to get back to cash flow positive, and that money, numbers getting lower each month. So those are kind of the big three metrics that we tend to think about.
No, and again, I think one of the misconceptions within business is my bank balance can never go down. If it's going down, it's a problem, and it isn't always the case, because sometimes you have to have those controlled and managed burn periods where you actually are just going to hemorrhage money, and then those sorts of things. We did it at the back end of last year when we made an investment in another business. We knew we were going to hemorrhage money, and we did hemorrhage that money. Fortunately, not as much as we originally planned for, so due to some great work from our ops director Ben, but it's not always a bad thing to spend money, and I think people are so scared to do that because of this misconception. And I think the other thing that people worry about as well is and don't necessarily always understand, is the differentiation between a profitable business and a cash viable business. What's your take on that sort of?
Well, I guess because we moved back into startup land, which means that you're basically investing a lot in the early days. You're not profitable. So the way we did it was we actually got some investment sort of crowdsourced from our customer base. So we sold like 3-year plans essentially for people at a really reduced rate, but we did that. I think we did it for £200, £250, maybe £300 for like a long lifetime access
commitment. Yeah.
And that actually gave us like a certain level to start with of cash, and then we raised some investment from angel investors. So we're seeing like the cash is here, and we're just burning down over a number of times. But we're always hoping that in that time, our monthly recurring revenue gets back up to making it sustainable again. So we're not forced to
do it again,
money again. And we will, and then when we do raise money, when we did raise money, it was always in a position of like we don't need to, but we'd like, here's all the things we want to invest in next. So that's kind of how we see it. But yeah, even I always like, for businesses that hadn't got a cash flow in place, they were like, oh, we've got plenty of cash. I'm like, well, then if you're sitting on this much cash, like, why not think about burning that down over the next 12 months and investing it so that it can take off again. And so that would be things like, a lot of businesses, my previous business, we didn't really invest in marketing in the same way that we're doing now. So we didn't invest in AdWords. We didn't invest in sales people. So all of that sort of stuff, it makes a massive difference to be able to say, right, we're going to take on two salespeople. That's going to cost us an extra, 70,000 a year, and it's going to hurt in the next 6 months. But what could if our revenues grow on the other side, what would that look like? So you see that kind of slope and curve. And I think if you're just sort of sitting on flat, it's not really, for me, that's not very exciting.
No.
You're just kind of, you're holding on, trying to maintain the status quo. And some businesses, maybe you're going fine, but maybe you could go faster. And it really is down to the individual to figure out, what do you want to do with the business? Is it growing fast enough? Could you do more? Because for us, we're kind of like, 30 people now. We're thinking like, well, we're going to be 50, over the next couple of years, and then we're going to be 100. And what kind of company can we create? So for us, there's a real kind of vision of like, we want to, by creating a company that's growing and investing in the business now, then we can actually, we can do a lot of good in the world as well. So.
Yeah. No, that's really, really good. I completely agree with you, and I think mindset is so important with business owners about what they want to achieve. And there's no right and there's no wrong answer. Lifestyle businesses are fantastic and they work for some people. So when people like me and you, probably they don't, because like you say, it's not particularly exciting. It's a little bit dull, but that don't make it wrong. It just means that the different things work for different people. So I think it's hugely important, and cash flow is so vital. And I think I keep going back to this mindset shift. If you want to really progress a business, then you really do need to be making those investments. And to make investments, you've got to know where you're spending it. And you've also got to know the difference between what's profitable and what's cash viable. Because I see so many businesses that are massively profitable, particularly in the construction industry, making good margins, but not getting paid for 120 days and going pop. So you're not making no margin because it's all just getting written off. So there's so many there's so many sort of barriers and things like misconceptions. Oh, well, the corporation tax bill, I'm paying all this in CIS or whatever it might be. I've got all this locked up in work in progress, and I just think, you don't understand the cash, but I'm making good money. Yeah, your margin's good, but you've got no cash, and you can't. That doesn't last forever, because at some point someone's going to pull the credit line and say enough's enough. You're going to need to get it in, and then by then you're too far in, and then sadly a lot of businesses go with that sort of ethos. So. Yeah, so very good. So have you got anything else that you want to talk about in terms of the importance in cash flow in business?
Well, we've covered all the basics of it. I think like just going back to what you're saying about that kind of a daily bookkeeping practice, like it feels like for us, we would never have invested in daily bookkeeping just to kind of have, if we were just getting a P&L sent to us every 6 months from our accountants. Actually having that cash flow just gives me so much confidence, gives me a real sense of where we are. Like, it does actually help you sleep at night, because you're not worrying about it in the same way. And I think it's worth the investment. Like, it's a little bit of time, but it's worth the investment of finding out who's going to work with you to make that happen. And I think it just builds maturity into the business, having those kind of financial reports, and it builds confidence. And if you're ever looking to, like you say, get a loan or raise more money, that showing that you've been working on those financial practices, it's really, really good. So yeah, we've just invested in that because we know we're building a bigger business, and we want to be right, and we want to feel like we're not flying by the seat of our pants.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got quite a few people listening today. The numbers have been quite good, which is surprising because they're listening to me bang on most of the time. So you must have been the draw to this rather than me. So if people listen to them, they're a little bit unsure about whether cash flow forecasting is for them, or whether they should spend their time doing it. Well, what would you say to them? What should they be doing, and what's the next steps?
I would tell them to come and speak to you, Phil.
Not even plugged out there.
No, but I mean, like, honestly, finding a good bookkeeper and accountant is just like so many people we've spoken to, they're getting far too late advice, and it's in a format that they can't understand. And so finding somebody who can actually give you that advice and get you in the right position where you need to be, it's just confidence building, and too many businesses don't have the confidence to really go for it. So I think, having the tools are out there now, and it's amazing that you can get like an enterprise level system just by stringing a couple of tools that talk to each other now. So you don't have you can have your receipt bank, your float, your zero, and then other like really great reporting tools like Fathom and Spotlight, and you can have your chaser built into that. It's just like all the potential of what you can do is huge, and let you get back to running the business and doing the things that you want to do, but like using it as an enabler rather than something that you'll get around to at some point.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, we put in full finance systems. It's costing companies £100 a month in software subscriptions. It's saving them hours and hours upon time. It's like no longer a full finance functions reserved for big companies or big corporates who have somebody sat in accounts who does everything all day. It can be done. It can be automated for in the grand scheme of things, for pennies. £100 a month. It's £3 a day. Stop going to Starbucks or whatever that might not be, or whatever. There's just so much available out there now, and the app stacks that are available, and obviously you're a massive part of ours. You're on our wall in our cloud academy. It is absolutely vital that people do invest in these sorts of finance functions, and don't just see themselves as small businesses or just as lifestyle businesses. They really do need to start to take confidence and to take belief in what they're doing, and continue to be successful. And I think that information is vital. So yeah. Brilliant. Well, I'm conscious I've taken up quite a lot of your time today. We're up to about 45 minutes, which is phenomenal, really. The time just flies. Have you got anything else that you'd like to say to anybody or anything like that?
Well, feel free to reach out to me. We've, like I say, we're passionate about like helping businesses grow, and we're starting with cash flow because we just think the problem hasn't been solved yet. There's lots of other areas we want to kind of move into in the future, but right now we're kind of focusing on the cash flow piece, and we really want to nail that. And we know there's so much more to do. So we love feedback if you're using the product. But also, I would just say, if you are thinking of growing your business, like the best things other things we've done are, getting good leadership systems in place. So we used this book recently, The Advantage, by a guy called Patrick Lencioni. We're going through that to kind of set out our business goals, and then the objectives that fall under that, and just get real clarity in the organization. So that's been something we've been doing internally, which has been fantastic. And then I also say working with a coach, because if you're thinking about growing, that's been one of the best things we've done, is bringing in a coach to kind of be a neutral third party that can actually challenge you. And it's really hard to lead a business and to do that, play that facilitator role. So we find, like, bringing in coaching and having the coach help us set clearly out, this is what we're doing with the business and this is where we're going, has really helped bring kind of clarity to the team, and we're in a really good place at the moment because of it. So if you're listening and you're thinking cash flow, then you're probably thinking of those other things as well. So that would be certainly my recommendation.
Brilliant. Well, that's excellent. There's some great advice in there, and I think a lot of people will take a lot of positives from the things that we spoke about here today. So thank you so much for joining us. I know you're a busy man. You run a highly successful business. I do appreciate your time. So basically, all that is left for me to do is to say thank you for joining us, Colin, and to tell you who's on next week's event. So next week we've got Martin Willock. Another character that will be joining the ranks. I didn't think I would be interviewing Martin. I've known Martin for many years. He works for Inquester Corporate Recovery, and we'll be talking about all things insolvency and debt management and things like that. So again, if you don't manage your cash in the right way, this is where you're ultimately going to end up. Hence the natural flow into that sort of thing. So yeah, basically, I'm looking forward to that next week. And thank you again so much, Colin. So I hope you have a brilliant afternoon, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Take care.
Yeah, all the best.